I had a chance recently to visit Bountiful Microschool, a home-based microschool currently serving just over a dozen students ages 10 to 16, with several hired teachers and a pay-what-you-can tuition model in Bountiful, Utah. Created by EdTech entrepreneur David Blake, co-founder and CEO of Degreed, and his wife, Mikkel, co-founder of Tech Moms, Bountiful Microschool offers its students a project-based experiential learning environment that enables content and curriculum to come alive for students. The couple wanted to bring the innovation and personalization they were seeing in the larger tech sector to the K-12 classroom to benefit their own children and others in their community. David and Mikkel, welcome to the Liberated Podcast.
Thank you.
Hi.
It's great to have you here. It was great to visit Bountiful Microschool and see what you've built and how you've really integrated kind of your home and microschool in the same location, and sort of see that as a template for microschools, hopefully throughout Utah and beyond. So I'd love to get into that. But before we talk about your decision to create Bountiful Microschool, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your backgrounds as tech entrepreneurs, kind of beyond the K-12 microschool space. And David, I know you're the CEO and founder of Degreed, Mikkel of Tech Moms. I'd love to hear a little bit about those enterprises and your decisions to be entrepreneurs in those spaces. Mikkel, did you want to go first? Yeah, great.
Yeah, sure. I'll go ahead. Yeah, so my background was sort of long and winding, but I had been home with my kids and sort of always intended to be home with my kids. And at some point, felt like it was time for me to get into the workforce, and felt very overwhelmed by that prospect and didn't know how to do that. I didn't have a network. I hadn't really built up much of a career before having my children. So I came across, luckily, I lived in the Bay Area at the time, and came across a program that helped introduce women into tech careers. And it helped jumpstart my career into becoming a software developer. I did a lot of learning on my own. After my kids went to bed, I put them to bed, and then I would work late into the night, learning to code using free resources, Khan Academy and Code Academy, and all those types of things. And eventually decided to take one of those full-time immersive boot camps to really ramp up my skills. And then eventually transitioned into my software career. And it really enabled my life in such a unique way to be able to still do all of the mom things that I needed and wanted to do, but still had a really fulfilling and happy career that was, took benefits of all the tech jobs, such as flexible work and remote work and higher pay and all of the things that enabled me to do both my mom life and my career life. So I did that for a number of years. And after a few years, really felt passionate about helping other women find that same kind of success. I had many women reach out to me and ask, how did you do that? Like, how do you make that transition? It's such a tough thing to do. And so I felt passionate about helping women make that transition. So I started an organization called Tech Moms. We're a nonprofit that helps women get a lay of the land of the tech industry, help them get some basic tech skills. We do basic coding with everybody, and help them understand where they would fit and how they can make that transition and have fulfilling careers and become wonderful employees in the tech industry.
I just love it. Yeah. And the URL for that is tech-moms.org. Recommend listeners and viewers check that out. Just love what you're doing there. So you kind of began your entrepreneurial journey with, as a self-starter, kind of self-taught programmer, and then creating Tech Moms to help other moms to enter the tech field. And then what about you, David? You were also in the tech space, even more in the ed tech space specifically. I'd love to hear a little bit about your background there.
Yeah, what our stories have in common is they're really these learning journeys. And so the short version of kind of my arc was in high school, was at the top of my class, sat for the ACT, was mind blown that these 3 hours on a Saturday morning were how all the grownups had decided we were going to sort all the 17-year-olds in and out of their future. And I scored well, like it wasn't that, I really was just so perturbed that this is it. at some point, I just imagined in my head there was a convening of all the grown-ups, and they gave all their best ideas, and this was like the best one they had. And I was just like, you can't be serious. This isn't actually how we're doing this. And so that was the spark, that was the catalyst that led me down a windy sort of road, started reading up on our systems of education, our history of education, slowly had this epiphany that it was a system, therefore I was a product of a system. I didn't really like what the system had turned me into. I realized I had managed to become an excellent student and had failed to become a good learner. And once I kind of had it framed that way, I resolved to myself that I was going to be a good learner, even if it came at the expense of being a good student. And so then I just sort of, for the first time in my life, had this kindle of a early flame for learning, and I just kept learning about learning, kept learning about education. That's kind of where the energy went. And so it's defined my career. And sort of I was 17 the last time I wasn't obsessing over the future of education. And Degreed in particular, to sort of jump to that point, was really around this belief that we needed to be lifelong learners, that just higher education, university, degree, one and done is no longer good enough in a world that's changing as rapidly as it is, but we had no language for it. So you would ask people, tell me about your education. They'll tell you where they went to university, what degree they got, or that they didn't go to college. And it betrays our inability to answer for lifelong learning. And there's kind of this absurdity. If I were to ask you, Carrie, tell me about your health, and you're like, oh yeah, I ran a marathon 19 years ago. That would be an absolutely absurd way to answer for your health. And it's not because marathons are bad, but there's just an absurdity to it. And yet that is exactly how the world answers for their education. Tell me about your education. People will tell you where they went to college, and that's absurd. And so really passionate about lifelong learning. Degreed was this platform that helped people track their, yes, academic education, but also their professional training, as well as, and I think most importantly, all of their self-directed and formal learning. And so it gives you this comprehensive view into someone's education. Companies around the world are now using it to see what their employees are learning, to see what skills they have inside of their organization. And the conferences that I've attended across the world also gave me exposure along the way to other innovative models of education in K-12 and higher ed. And a lot of what led us to microschooling was this exposure to the innovative work that others were doing that we were kind of picking up along the way.
I love that. So many good things in what you just said, especially hearing you say that you felt like you were an excellent student, but not a great learner. I know I can relate to that. I think many listeners and viewers can as well, that we kind of go through the K-12 conventional schooling system. We may come out well-schooled, but maybe not well-educated. And I love that you began to tackle that in these really creative ways with Degreed, and now with creating a microschool to really try to show a template for what's possible in K-12 learning outside of a conventional classroom.
Yeah.
So what were sort of the specifics that led you to the microschooling pathway? I know that your children are also involved, so this was very much sort of a personal parenting decision. But what was it about microschooling in particular that attracted you and that you felt like you needed to create what didn't yet exist?
Sure. You want to take that?
We might have different answers for like what brought us there.
Yeah.
But I grew up, my mom is a teacher, and I've seen very closely, that side of, obviously I was a student myself, but that side of things as well. And I've always seen the pros and cons to those kinds of systems, and felt like my mom was an incredible teacher, doing incredible things inside that system, but it was easy to see why that system was not serving so many people. And so with our own kids, I have, similar to Dave, I loved school growing up. I also was a great student. I just also came out of the system, though, slowly feeling my sort of love of learning being crushed, right? Even though it was something that was innate in me from the beginning, which I think it is for everybody, for most people anyway, I could feel that like I was having to focus on grades and all of these other things that wasn't really about the learning. It became about something else. And I really, really didn't want that for my kids. I wanted my kids to love learning forever. I wanted them to keep that part of it. To me, that was the most important. There's not one thing that I learned in high school that was like, oh, if I didn't go to that high school, I wouldn't have known that thing and my life would be ruined, right? Like that just isn't how the kind of things that we're learning there. But the ways in which I have continued to love learning have impacted my life deeply in my, pursuit to become a software developer or any of these other things. It was that love of learning that was driving that. And so it's just been really deeply important to me that my kids have preserved that, that love. So.
And if I can just follow up there for a moment, Mikkel, so how were the kids learning prior to creating Bountiful Microschool? I guess what was your educational experience for them as a parent?
Yeah, my kids, we lived in San Francisco for my kids up until we moved here. And in the public school, it's a tricky situation out there as far as lotteries and being, assigned to kind of random schools. We had found a school, an elementary that we had really liked, but it was still kind of the old model. One of the things though, I think about when I, think about their journey is their preschool experiences. We had access to some fun and unique preschool experiences that I felt like were a better template for how I would actually want my kids to learn. For example, my oldest daughter, we put her in it was a French preschool that a French woman did out of her own home. And she just did all of these just amazing, incredible things with these women, with these preschoolers, right? They did this elaborate art, and they did all of these, she would do these showcases, and they would do these plays and all of these things that were just, and she kept the classes so small. She kept it to, I think, 4 to 6. And it was just she brought her joy of learning, and she brought all of that to this situation. And when I look back at my kids, earlier school days, it's some of those models that I feel like were closer to what I wanted for my own kids than even a good public school. We liked our public school as far as, that old model goes. But some of these other options that we had there really, I think were a really good template and model for us and for me, for what I wanted for my kids as they were growing up.
Yeah. And so, David, when you moved to Utah, you moved with the expectation that you were going to create this home-based microschool. So what was that process like? What really made you decide now is the time we have to do this, and we're actually going to search for a property that's going to be conducive to this?
Yeah. It's probably one of the most common pieces of parenting advice ever given is just, it goes by so fast. And I feel like a lot of it was just that feeling. And so we have 3 kids, and our oldest was already in middle school. And we had always kind of said that middle school was the catalyst. Like we were busy raising young children, trying to establish our careers and fight to bring our ideas and dreams alive in the world. And it's hard to bite it all off, just sort of all at once. But we really had our oldest getting to middle school as this kind of catalyst. We'll revisit kind of everything then. And so when that came up, we got exposed to Prenda, which really was the first kind of exposure we had to the concept of microschooling, and was very inspired by Kelly and their model. For me, there was this sense of I didn't want my children to be the cobbler's children who have no shoes. I've literally dedicated just, the entirety of my adult career and so much of my brain and heart to education, but kind of quietly, my children were in the background having the same old experience that we had, whatever it was 20 plus years prior in our elementary school. And so being exposed to seeing all these new innovative models, just felt like I wouldn't be able to be kind of happy with myself and how it played out our family if we didn't actually do something for our kids, even while we were doing a lot to try and affect education sort of systematically. So we decided now's the time, we got to do it. And we felt like the micro school format was going to give us the platform, kind of the vehicle to serve these ambitions and hopes and dreams that we had for our kids' education. Neither of us actually felt equipped or called to be the teacher. So, we weren't ever seriously tempted by kind of just a more traditional homeschooling. We wanted a cohort, kind of believe in the importance of peers. We wanted it to be multi-age, believe in the power of what being taught by and teaching others can do. We wanted it to be very application based. There's very few silver bullets in education. It's messy, it's organic, and probably rightfully so. But the more you apply learning, the better every learning outcome gets. So, and we were in San Francisco in a small house that was not going to enable us to do what we wanted to do, and started looking in several states, kind of the tech hubs. We both are working in tech. And it took a minute to find, most homes weren't built with the presumption of a classroom being housed anywhere. So it took us a minute, but we found this home here in Utah that had just kind of the perfect space to put in a classroom, and it's served the school and its purposes very well.
Yeah, just such a beautiful, wide open space, nicely separating kind of your personal private living space from the classroom environment. What year or when did you officially open?
We started fall of COVID 2020. So for us, none of this was catalyzed by COVID. We had already gotten a real estate agent. We were looking before we had ever heard of the coronavirus or knew what that word meant. So this was something we were intent on doing, but just as the sequence played out, we ended up finding the house in spring of 2020. We ended up moving in summer of 2020. And, in some ways, COVID was probably a bit of maybe a catalyst or a boon in that it brought other people kind of, if you will, to the market, more open to thinking about, new models of education. And we didn't know anyone when we moved here. Well, that's not true. We had one family that we knew, and they joined the school. And between them, and a lot of it was them, they sort of got the ball rolling with word of mouth. And we've done all of this really primarily through word of mouth, both filling the seats and building the cohort and the students, as well as the amazing teachers that we've been able to find.
So tell us maybe, Mikkel, the biggest difference that you see between the learning that happens at Bountiful Microschool and kind of a conventional classroom. What is the biggest contrast there?
So, by design, there is a lot of sort of student-driven learning. And it's not, 100% student-driven. We have the teachers. We want it to be, teacher supervised and managed and aided. But these kids spend half of the day, more than half of the day, pursuing things that excite them, that they're passionate about, that they want to do. Again, to the, my purpose of wanting them to love learning. We wanted to really spend a lot of time in their day doing things that they're excited about. And the teachers have been wonderful at helping them take their ideas and shape them into something that will teach them, good principles and, things that they need to know generally, but driven by the things that they are already excited about and already have interest in and want to, go down this path. So they have a lot of that freedom, which, has its own growing pains of learning how to manage, 10-year-olds and 16-year-olds who have very varying levels of kind of self-driving abilities. And so they get to work inside goals. They do a lot of goal building and, having to learn to take a process from beginning to truly end and completion and finishing a process. And how do you manage a process from, your stakeholders, who we told the kids is, their teachers are their stakeholders, their parents are their stakeholders. How do they manage those people through their projects? Trying to bring in some concepts that, will prepare them for jobs and things in the real world. They have to return and report each week, about the projects that they're doing. And so that's probably the biggest thing I think that's maybe different than what you would see in a traditional classroom is how much the students are driving things.
I love that. So you're both still, running your own companies and now overseeing Bountiful Microschool. I'd love to hear what is different about being an education entrepreneur, microschool founder, compared to your other entrepreneurial hats. David, maybe start with you this time.
Yeah, I mean, I would say doing this has, I think, made us both deeply appreciative of just the administrators. When we think of school, we don't often think first about administration, but we're essentially like the de facto principals. And there is kind of a fixed cost, if you will. It doesn't matter if a business is 13 students and 2 teachers, or hundreds of employees. Like, you have to set up sort of all of your legal, your accounting, your payroll, your benefits, your tax filings. And so there is just a deep appreciation for the fact that this takes work. And so there's part of that. I think, how does it compare or contrast? I mean, I also am deeply grateful for, we have a sense of purpose and philosophy. We have kind of framed up the pedagogy and some of the day, but in our case, we have 2 teachers, and they do an incredible job helping to frame up the curriculum and the actual learning plans and the learning. Neither of us are, as much as we both work in the world of education, we aren't ourselves trained educators. So deep appreciation there. And some of your stakeholders are, 11. Like, that also changes things, from our professional endeavors. And we have a meeting every week with the parents and the teachers. So every Tuesday we meet. And then on occasion, the students come up and sort of represent their point of view as we talk through some of the decisioning.
Great. Mikkel, what about for you? What are the differences between running Bountiful Microschool and creating Tech Moms?
There is just something about working with and having sort of some level of stewardship over children and people's children. Like, there is just nothing more important to anyone in this world than their kids, our kids. And so the stakes can feel high. It can feel sometimes, I mean, as entrepreneurs, like, we know about risk and we know about those things. And I think we're probably fairly comfortable with those things in a broader sense. But there is something about having this be, people's children and our own children that sort of takes that to a new level, I think, of just, making sure, we've had conversations over and over again that this is, is this the right thing? Is this, we have to keep that conversation going all the time, because these are the lives of the people that matter most to us and to, everyone in the family in our schools. So I think that, to me, that's probably the biggest difference, is sort of the stakes and maybe in a way I didn't quite anticipate, and just, the care that we have for these kids, and sort of just like wanting to make sure that we're doing the best we can and doing right by the kids. So
Great. So when we met in person, when I was able to visit Bountiful Microschool, David, you said that as an entrepreneur, your mind immediately goes to scalability. And I'm curious of your thoughts of the microschool model generally, Bountiful Microschool specifically. What do you think about scalability, replication within this kind of educational framework?
Sure. Going back to maybe just that last response and talking about sort of the administrative part of it, like, I do think there is real appeal in the Prenda and other models like it that are facilitating some of the administration of it all, and enabling families and teachers to get to the work of educating. Because I could, if we had more resources that way that we had been able to tap into, it could have been a real benefit. When we started, Prenda was not operating in Utah. The Utah has since passed a bill that is going to facilitate, I think, more micro schools being able to operate. But we were really doing this kind of in a moment in time where we had, besides the fact that I knew of Prenda, there was no like other scaffolding or resource. We didn't know anyone else. We didn't know anyone else who was running a micro school. So there were no like efficiencies. So I really do appreciate the role that you and others are starting to bring kind of the community together. I think maybe the last thing I'll say here is for us, the first, second, and third sort of considerations were how do we make a great experience? And it's just sitting further down on the list, you know, somewhere fourth, fifth, sixth, I don't know, which is how could you replicate this, or how could we package this up to benefit, you know, others? It's sort of enough of a burden or enough of a responsibility just to feel like, you know, how do we get this right for these kids? And we're now in our fourth year. So I think, you know, we've been able to be at it long enough to find some of the things that work and work out some of the things that didn't, to start thinking about maybe how you could resource some of this up. But I would say only just, you know, recently has it felt like there's enough room to kind of grapple with that.
Yeah, I'd love to follow up just a minute on that too, David. You mentioned the Utah Fits All Scholarship, the Universal Education Savings Account program, school choice policy that Utah passed in 2023, joining the ranks of several other states in passing universal school choice that allows a portion of state allocated funding for education to go directly to families to choose whatever an educational environment works best for their kids, including microschooling. I wonder if you can talk a little bit more about how you see that piece of this kind of policy puzzle fitting into the potential scalability and replication of microschools more generally.
Sure. I mean, to kind of speak honestly about it, you know, we started this in a moment where, you know, we're both in the tech world. Our careers are in the tech world. As the tech world's doing well, you know, that helps, you know, us do well as the tech, you know, it's not been easy years to be in tech. And so, you know, our own finances have been under pressure. It was just when we started it, it was better times and it's harder times now. And so we have committed to, and we've operated this as a pay what you can model. But, you know, right now, the essentially tuition that we take in does not cover the expenses of the school. So, you know, we have been subsidizing it. We were lucky and grateful to be recipients of the VELA micro grant this last year. But I do think, you know, it just exposes very quickly how sort of precipitous this is. If microschooling is going to be a real and viable option for many, it can't be predicated upon just the personal finances of folks. I mean, we're running a school, you know, it needs continuity, it needs reliability, it needs those things. And so we are, I do think it is really important to have some of the funding and some of the infrastructure that is going to enable this model to happen, you know, in a sustainable way.
Great. And Mikkel, I'd love to hear what you think about the future of Bountiful Microschool. Where do you see your program headed? And then microschooling more generally, or some of these more personalized alternative educational models. What are your theories of what you expect to come?
Yes, you know, we have said, you know, Dave said this already, we have really been heads down in our micro school for the last few years, just trying to make it work and be scrappy and do what we need to do. We have only recently been able to get connected with the other kind of micro schools in the area, in Utah more broadly. I have to admit that I'm torn because there's, I actually, you know, I believe in sort of collective education, in the sense that education is something that benefits us as a society, as a community. And so the ways in which we can support each other in that is, I think, really important. And so I don't necessarily just support pulling all monies out of the, you know, public education systems and doing these other things. but it's a tricky balance, because I also very much believe that our current system is not working. So, the futures of micro schools, I would love to see, this is all just kind of my personal beliefs here, but I would love to see funding go in both places still. Like and in particular in Utah, we really have very low funding for education nationwide, as compared to the rest of the nation. And I would really prefer to see a lot more money going in so that we can come to better solutions for everybody. Because it feels like, again, as Dave said, this idea that like it's going to rely on just personal finances of individuals to make anything work, nothing will work. We can't, nothing is scalable, nothing is sustainable when we're doing it that way. So I would actually really like to see more cooperation or cohesion or something between sort of our public options and our kind of private micro school options. So I don't exactly know what that looks like, but that's actually my preference. That's how I would like to see it go.
And what about for Bountiful Microschool? Mikkel, what do you see the future there?
We're committed to doing this with our kids. We've been loving it. We have been so thrilled to see, how it's been going. We're in our 4th year, and I've got a 10-year-old who's not yet in it. She'll be coming in next year. And so, for us, like we said, it started with our kids first, and we have really, really been so grateful for the other families and students that have been in it with us. It's been such a wonderful community to be part of. And so, for the foreseeable future, we're hoping to be able to keep doing this and keep seeing it affect, we'd love to get, like maybe a little bit bigger, I guess, as we're going over time. But it's been really, really wonderful, and we'd love to see it keep going.
I love that. So as we begin to wrap up, I'd love to end with asking you some entrepreneurial advice. Not only are you successful entrepreneurs outside of microschooling, but you're also founders of a new school. What advice do you have for prospective education entrepreneurs who are looking to launch a school or creative learning model, kind of drawing from your experience, again, both as tech entrepreneurs and microschool founders? David, what about starting with you?
Yeah, I think what they hold in common is that before you start on the journey, it always sort of feels, I think, actually scarier than when you take a couple of steps into it and start to break the problems down. It can just feel like big. And so the advice I might give is, take a couple of steps, and a lot of it seems to kind of fall away, or the problems that feel, the size of a mountain, you realize you just gotta kind of, take one step at a time, and, the next step's never, more than you can handle. Rarely is. Sometimes the steps get tough, but, I really just have, I grew up very risk averse. I grew up not an entrepreneur, is the honest truth. Being a good student in many ways in the system is very antithetical to entrepreneurship. Teachers told me jump, I said how high. That's it. They taught me how to follow rules, and I was good at it. And entrepreneurship is a bit of breaking the rules and breaking out of that. So, for me, it really did always kind of feel big, but I'd say this is achievable. It's achievable for everyone. I think no matter where you live, like as Brenda has shown, I do just think, the economics can circle out if you can find like-minded people, pool resources, as everyone's doing more work to pull kind of government funding into this. I think it will only get hopefully easier, but, anyone can do it.
Great advice. Mikkel, what would you say?
I would say that it's important to take some time to really kind of self-introspection and really understand like your why and what you want out of it. We spent years before we even started doing any of this, kind of thinking like, what is it that we actually want for this? What is important to us about this? Because it's easy to it's easy to sort of say, like the public school they were in, it was a good school, like, had a great community, like, so why do this? Why kind of upend our lives and do these things? And then when times sort of get tricky, or when there's barriers that come up, when you're super clear on like kind of why you're doing this or what you want for your kids or what you want out of this, it can just help bring clarity as you're getting through the tougher times, about, why you're doing it and how to, what the right path is to get where you want to be.
I love that. So take those first initial steps into entrepreneurship. It won't be as bad as you may expect. And then have a really clear vision of your and belief in your why to kind of help you through those challenging times and those barriers. So just great advice for some prospective entrepreneurs. If my listeners and viewers want to learn more about you and about Bountiful Microschool, what is the best way for them to learn more?
So the URL is bountiful.school, or you can reach out directly to me or Mikkel. I'll give my email address out into the ether, but it's d@davidblake.com. And we're happy to personally be a resource or help anyone out who's on this journey.
Wonderful. Well, I wish you all the best in your entrepreneurial pursuits at Bountiful Microschool and beyond. David and Mikkel Blake, thank you so much for being on the Liberated podcast.
Thanks, Gary.
Thanks for having us.